talk is on Mauss's economic vision, 1920 to 25. The financial turmoil that Keynes predicted would be the consequence of the Versailles Treaty was soon realized. The stability of the franc was a matter of acute public concern, since it was taken to be a measure of France's international standing, and political panic when the franc dropped was commonplace. The left blamed it all on a few rich families. Mausss wrote 7 articles about the exchange rate crisis in Populaire beginning December 1922, and returned to the issue a year later, eventually producing an article daily for 2 weeks in March 1924. The style of this financial journalism is notable on several counts. Mauss set out in alarmist fashion, but settles eventually down into a voice of reason, seeking to steer a pragmatic course of stabilization in the national interest. Being able to take a position on the economy was vital to political engagement, he said, quote, "Every socialist is obliged to have a few notions about political economy, or economic sociology as we now say." The problems were both urgent and complex. More striking still is the tone Mauss adopts when discussing what we would call the markets, as if he himself were an expert player. After studying the price curves, exchange rates, and money supply since the end of the war, he makes, quote, "the bold assertion which militants and scientists must venture only very scrupulously, that the dollar will float between 20 and 25 francs, but will not go much higher than that." The dollar exchange rate had been 11 francs in 1921, but he's offering his disciples a time to look forward to. He studied fiduciary inflation and concluded that inflation was not the cause of exchange rate depreciation, blaming rather panic in the markets. Storms were brewing from every direction. Quote, "These are human phenomena at work, collective psychology, imponderables, beliefs, credulity, confidence, all swirling about." Another striking feature of these articles is personal attacks. Clemenceau was a particular target, but Mauss's sharpest invective was directed at Lucien Clotz. Quote, "An incompetent Jew, an insignificant personality, whom Clemenceau had put in charge of finance, quote, perhaps out of Satanism." He treated Poincaré with more respect, but still insisted on pointing the finger at real persons rather than indulge the convenient abstractions beloved by left-wing conspiracy theorists. An unpublished paper called A Means of Overhauling Society, the Manipulation of Currencies, provides a link between these reflections on national political economy and the substantive analysis and programmatic conclusions of the gift. Here Mauss claims, following Simeon, that the great economic revolutions are monetary in nature, and that manipulation of currencies and credit could be a method of social revolution without pain or suffering. He wished to give an economic content to juridical socialism. Quote, "It suffices to create new monetary methods within the firmest and narrowest bounds of prudence. It will then suffice to manage them with the most cautious rules of economics, to make them bear fruit among the intended beneficiaries. And that is revolution. In this way, the common people of different nations will be allowed to know how they can have control over themselves without the use of words, formulas, or myths." End quote. It should be noted that Mausss was very confident of electoral victory for the left when he wrote about the exchange rate crisis. Quote, "Socialist democracy is on its way. The future is ours. We are living in a great time." That's in May 1924. And his confidence was justified in June 24 by the left victory. And in that same month, the editors signed the publishing contract for the new series of Année sociologique, and the second half of 1924, which was also the first half year of left-wing government of a sort, was spent preparing its publication, which included, of course, Mauss's famous essay on the gift. The idea of economic progress through specialization was at the core of the British economics founded by Adam Smith. A century later, economic individualism was the cornerstone of an evolutionary social theory articulated by Herbert Spencer and popularized as the native ideology of the triumphant Western bourgeoisie. Durkheim, in the Division of Labor of Society, tried to show that division was a dialectical process of separation and integration, that society became stronger as labor was divided and as the scope for individual action was enhanced. Emphasis on the making of individual contracts obscured the social glue of what Durkheim called the non-contractual element in the contract that made economy possible, a combination of law, state, customs, morality, and shared history that it was the sociologist's task to make more visible. The individual is the result of social development and not, as in Smith's origin myth, its source. The gift is in a direct line of descent from Durkheim's book. Mauss summarily eliminates the two utilitarian ideologies that purport to account for the evolution of contracts. Natural economy, Smith's idea that individual barter or markets without money is an expression of human nature, was the first of these. And second, the notion that primitive communities are altruistic, giving way eventually to our own regrettably selfish but more efficient individualism. Against the contemporary move to replace markets with communist states, he insists that the complex interplay between individual freedom and social obligation is synonymous with the human condition, and that markets and money are universal, if not in their current impersonal form. The argument proceeds through 5 sections. The introduction identifies the essay's aim to reach conclusions of a somewhat archaeological kind concerning the nature of human transaction in societies around us or that have immediately preceded our own. We shall describe the phenomena of exchange and contract in those societies that are not, as has been claimed, devoid of economic markets, since the market is a human phenomenon that in our view is not foreign to any known society, but whose system of exchange is different from ours, end quote. The market here, in the areas that he will investigate, lacks specialist traders, impersonal money, and modern sale contracts. But we can see the morality and organization of such transactions, which, quote, still function in our societies in unchanging fashion, and so to speak, hidden below the surface. And as we believe we have found one of the human foundations on which our societies are built, we shall be able to deduce a few moral conclusions concerning certain problems posed by the crisis in our own law and economic organization. There we will call a halt, end quote. This dual purpose couldn't be clearer, but Mauss's decision to leave out any extended discussion of the morality and economic organization of capitalist societies is one of the main causes for widely divergent interpretations of his work. It is not that he lacked the capacity for such a discussion, but rather that he chose once more to separate his academic and political writing, save for the semi-detached concluding chapter. Mauss's key term for the range of archaic contracts he intends to investigate is untranslatable into English and something of a feudal relic in French. Prestation is a service performed out of obligation, something like community service as an alternative to imprisonment. Its main use today is as a guarantee to call out labor to service essential machines when they break down.